Morning. So this week's Parshas Yisro, and in some ways it's, instead of me speculating, let's just talk about what actually happens. This week's Parshas Yisro. In this week's Parsha we have the description of the giving of the Torah being given to us on Har Sinai. We have the Aseres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments. A question that's asked a lot and addressed a lot is, what actually happened? What was the big deal about this event? So we come out of Egypt, we are told you're going to go out of Egypt, you're going to travel to Mount Sinai, we're going to get the Torah. Sounds amazing, right? But if we stop and think about the reality historically, it says in the Gemara that our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, their children, they observed the mitzvahs before the Torah was given. Which means that they were obviously in somehow, and that's another whole discussion on its own, were in touch with the Torah and knew what Torah says, even though it hadn't actually been presented to them yet. So, if they were already learning Torah, and we actually have a story, it says on the way when Yaakov, after Yosef sent his brothers back to get Yaakov, let Yaakov know that Yosef's alive in Egypt and he should come down to Egypt and Yosef will be able to provide for him there. So on the way to Egypt, it says that in the Chumash, in the Torah, it says that Yaakov sent Yehuda ahead of him to go ahead and to reach Egypt before Yaakov arrived. And Rashi quotes that the reason he sent him ahead was to set up yeshivas, to set up places of study. So when Yaakov arrives, there will be places to study Torah. So clearly, they were studying Torah before this happened. Before Torah was given, there was an awareness of what it says in Torah. There was Torah study that was happening. There was observance of the mitzvahs. So what happened? We came to Har Sinai, we came to Mount Sinai. Hashem, God created, gives us the Torah, which we already were aware of. We were already observing. So really, the extent of it all is basically just ceremonial, it seems like. Right, you have a graduation ceremony for kids that are graduating elementary school. They've already practiced the speeches that they're saying, so it's not like, it's not like the kids coming up and ad-libbing and expressing themselves. You have people are doing talks that they prepared before. Nothing is actually happening that didn't happen before. It's ceremonial. And the ceremonies are nice. There's nothing wrong with it. And they can be very powerful. They can be very powerful experiences, and they can be valuable and important. But surely there's more to Matan Torah than that. It says that God came with it, and there was the thunder and the lightning and the clouds. All of that was just about giving us a dramatic ceremonial experience. It doesn't seem to add up. There has to have been more to it than that. So the question is, what is it? What actually happened? If this is the seminal moment at which we became a people, we officially became the Jewish people were officially born. Why? Because of a ceremony? And what actually happened, what changed, something very fundamental and very important did change when Hashem gave us the Torah. And those words that I just said were the key words. I didn't actually plan it out that way, but as they came out of my mouth, I was like, Hashem gave us the Torah. We were aware of what the Torah said before. We were learning, studying the Torah. We were observing Torah. But we were doing it of our own initiative. And we're going to come back to that. That's going to be really the end point, or close to the end point. But what changed, practically speaking, and when I say practically, I don't mean practically necessarily in terms of our material, physical experience, because the physical reality that we are consciously aware of and experience is only part of the full truth, part of everything that exists. There's a lot that exists that is equally real as the physical world is, but we don't experience it, generally speaking, as humans. We can't experience it or interact with it with our five senses, etc. So in terms of that bigger picture of many layers of reality, many realities, which include the physical reality and non-physical realities, the big picture of which all of those are a part, something changed very significantly. So there's a pasuk in Tehillim. We read it actually in Hallel whenever we say Hallel. It says, Hashamayim shamayim laHashem. The heavens are heavens for Hashem, for God, v'ha'aretz nosan livnei adam. The earth, land, he gave to us. So there is clearly here a distinction between separate realities. And shamayim v'aretz, we don't mean the stratosphere or, beyond a certain altitude where there are clouds and where the air gets thinner and the makeup of the atmosphere changes versus planet Earth, the ground. We're talking about physical versus spiritual. So shamayim here, the word shamayim can have different meanings because there are times when the word shamayim refers to what we would refer to physically as the sky. And there are times when it refers to spirituality, what we often mean when we say the word heavens. Right? It's the same thing with heaven. Heavens could mean physical sky. We can also use it as a almost kind of pronoun, not quite pronoun, but as a metaphor for spiritual realities, which we, for whatever reason, associate with being upward, being up there, even though they're no more up there than they are here. So when we say shamayim laHashem, the heavens are for Hashem, what that means is that when Hashem created this, we could call it multiverse. You can sit in here if you want. There's no one right behind there, at least for the moment. But wherever you're comfortable. You're welcome. Hashem created spirituality and the world of matter, the physical reality. And they are defined very differently. As we ourselves know, we interact with the physical world, we interact with it, we experience it with our five senses, we can interact with it, we can touch it, we can affect it. We don't experience spirituality with our five senses. We can't manipulate or affect or interact with spirituality with our bodies, with our hands, with our feet. At least not directly. So shamayim laHashem, the realms of spirit, spiritual realities, these spiritual worlds, whatever we want to call them, are beyond us. They were created to be up there, so to speak. They are for God. V'ha'aretz, the physical world God gave to us. And they're separate. Right? Spirituality doesn't physically exist. Angels do not physically exist. They don't. The fact that they don't physically exist, they're not made out of molecules, they're not made out of physical matter, they're not made out of physical energy, doesn't mean that they're any less real than things that do physically exist. It just means that they exist in some other dimension, reality, whatever we want to call it. I don't think there's really a perfect English word, but that's why I tend to throw in a few of them at the same time, because none of them are perfect. So, sorry? Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for the compliment, I should say. Actually, just for the sake of a laugh, when I was young, I don't know if it was a teenager or just beyond teenage, I had a friend in Australia who I was very close with. I spent a lot of time in his house. And we were at the Shabbos table once, and his mother says to me, you know what? You remind me of Rashi. And I was like, and she goes, you have something to say about everything. So it's not the first time I've been compared to Rashi. I think this one's a little more complimentary, but not really. But anyways, so she may watch this video when it goes on Facebook too. So there is physical and spiritual. Neither is more or less real than the other. Both are equally true, both are equally real, but neither actually exists in terms of the other's experience. Spirituality, angels, all the things we talk about that are spiritual do not physically exist. If we were to define clearly the parameters that define physical existence, let's call it just I'm sure it's an oversimplification, but things that are made out of matter and energy go hand in hand. Energy has mass, and matter, by definition, carries energy. They are partners. Call it one thing, call it two things. Let's call that the defining factor of what physically exists. It's made out of physical mass / energy. Angels are not made out of physical mass and energy. Therefore, they do not physically exist. As far as the parameters that define physical existence are concerned, they do not exist. And the same is true in reverse. If you were to take the parameters and clarify, which I'm not even going to try to do, the parameters that define spirituality, and here I'm putting, that's a very broad stroke, because I'm dividing physical versus spiritual, but within the sub-realm or category of spirituality, there are many, many different realities that are in some ways as different from each other as they are from the reality that we know. Because we are inside of this physical reality, to us that's all in one basket as spiritual. But there are many different realities or realms, layers, worlds in that category that are equally as different to each other. So the parameters that define each of those realities, as far as those definitions or parameters are concerned, physical matter doesn't exist. So that's what this pasuk is telling us. Shamayim shamayim la'Hashem va'aretz nosen livnei adam. Hashem gave the world, the physical world, to us to interact with, to experience, to be a part of. Then there is spirituality, which is not part of our conscious experience. It's not something that we can interact with. That is a situation which is the result of the objective nature of physical matter and the objective nature of, let's call it, for the sake of simplicity, spiritual matter. The way that they work is that neither exists as far as the other is concerned, neither exists in the other one's experience, and therefore they are separated. So this world is there for those who are designed to experience it and interact with it. Haaretz nasan livnei adam, the earth he gave to man. Shamayim shamayim la'Hashem, and spirituality is designed for the experience and interaction of those who were designed to experience and interact with it, which is not us. So the natural state of affairs is that matter and spirit are completely separate. There's no way that they can interact with each other.
Even when Hashem created the world, with Adam and Chava was the same?
How do you mean? That they weren't able to interact with spirituality? Yeah.
But they spoke to Hashem.
Okay, Hashem's different, and we'll get to that. Because Hashem's not spirituality. Hashem is the creator of physicality and spirituality. Hashem is the creator of matter and spirit. And that's going to be an important part of the discussion as we move along.
Also, they didn't have Yitzhar, right? It was like outside of them.
Yeah.
So
but it was a part of their experience, because clearly they did that. They did the Chet Etzadas. So the design of the system was very different, but it was still a part of their experience. Things were very different for Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, that's for sure. Things were very different to the way they are now. But there still was this separation between matter and spirit.
So when people wrote Karbanis, it didn't count? Like Noah?
We're going to get... Well, yeah, okay, so let's go there. That's basically the next step in the discussion. And it's not only Karbanos, it's all mitzvahs, right? If the Jews were keeping the mitzvahs before the Torah was given. And so for this, there's the Midrash. Midrash Rabbah actually gives an analogy. It says, Mashal lamaha dava domer. And mashal means an analogy. To what is this similar? That's the little translation of those words. So it gives a mashal. There are two cities. The cities in the Midrash are named Romi and Syria. Let's call them Rome and Syria. I don't know if that's actually the cities that it's referring to, but it either is or it isn't. Doesn't really matter. There are two cities. And the king who rules over both of these cities, the region in which both of these cities exist, has made a law that the residents of these two cities may not travel to each other. The residents of Romi cannot travel to Syria. The residents of Syria cannot travel to Romi. So that's Shamayim Shamayim la'Hashem va'aretz nosen livnei adam. Things that are part of the world of matter cannot experience or interact with the world of spirit. Things that are part of the world of spirit cannot interact with or experience the world of matter. Then the king comes along and abolishes that decree and says the residents of these two cities may now travel back and forth. And it continues, and that's what happened when Hashem gave the Torah. Hashem said, Elyonim yerdu letachtonim, that which is above shall descend down to that which is below. That which is below tachtonim ya'alu le'elyonim, that which is below will ascend up to interact with that which is above. And then it continues, and Hashem says, Va'ani hamaschil, I'm going to take the first step and begin the process. As it says, Hashem came down to Har Sinai. So when Hashem came down to Har Sinai, Hashem was saying, I'm now allowing this communication between above and below. I'm going to take the first step. You know, you have a cake on the table, you serve it for dessert, no one wants to take it first piece. You cut a piece and take it out, and then people will take more. Hashem said, I'm going to dive in, take the first step, and break the ice.
So does it mean that before Hashem said, I'm not interrupting to this world, Gashmis world? Like, Shemaim is for me, and like land is for me.
So before, this is coming back to your question from before, right? So what actually happens? So before, people fulfilled mitzvahs, and mitzvahs had outcomes, but the outcomes remained spiritual. So it doesn't mean that there was no interaction at all between matter and spirit, but they couldn't integrate. So if someone did a mitzvah, let's say in one example, the Zohar says that when Yaakov did the whole story with the sticks, this is one of the textbook examples that's used to illustrate this. We know the story of Yaakov with the sticks, and he used them to manipulate the sheep that were born in order to affect his deal, to allow him to get more sheep in his deal with Lavan. So the Zohar says when Yaakov did that whole thing with the sticks, he was actually causing the same spiritual outcome that we generate today when we put on tefillin. The difference is that was a spiritual outcome. When we put on tefillin today, that generates a spiritual outcome, and this is true of all mitzvahs. Just this example is referring specifically to tefillin. Let's take Shabbos candles, right? When we light Shabbos candles, we're fulfilling a mitzvah, which means we're fulfilling our obligation, a halachic obligation. We are causing some sort of spiritual outcome that we don't really relate to the way that we relate to the world of matter, because it's just the way it is. That spiritual outcome has many ramifications, some of which are the fact that some of that spiritual outcome that we generate also interacts with the physical world, with the candles, with the wick, and the fuel that's allowing the wick to continue burning, and whatever it is, the natural lighter we use to light that, and all the things that were used as part of the process to get to this point, the work that we did to generate the income that we used to buy the candles, etc., etc. So all of those things now have become divine, have become spiritual, godly. Right? And the example that I always use is something like this. You have a chitas, this is a sefer, and you have this. God is making both of them exist. But the extent to which God is being integrated into the actual object and the experience of the object, the fabric of the object, is very different, which is why this can go in the garbage and this can't. Right? This is holy. What does it mean it's holy? It means that not only does this exist in the same space in which God exists, but godliness, divinity, has actually become integrated into the molecules that the paper and the ink are made out of, and the cover, etc., etc. So now, not only is this made to exist by God, and not only does it coexist with God in the same space in which God is present, but God has actually become integrated into the object itself. That couldn't happen before the Torah was given. So we could use this to study Torah, but it wouldn't become holy as a result, because there was that barrier which prevented integration of the two, for the two to actually become one. It doesn't mean that there was no way for something in one world to have ramifications in the other world. Right? The angels came to visit Avram, which means that there was some sort of spiritual entity that was coming into this world and being present in the world of the physical, but it didn't integrate into and become part of the physical world, part of the physical experience.
So whenever they put on tefillin, it wasn't holy. Like, I mean, afterwards...
The tefillin didn't become holy, correct.
So afterwards they could throw it, but in the moment they put it on, it didn't become...
It didn't become holy. It was a mitzvah, and it caused some sort of spiritual outcome, but the spiritual outcome didn't affect the physical object because there was a separation between them. There was a barrier that didn't allow them to integrate into each other.
They could put whatever they wanted, like, think that it's tefillin.
That, I don't know. I know that Yaakov did that. At the end of the day, the mitzvah of tefillin is defined by the halachos of the mitzvah of tefillin. It doesn't say that he fulfilled the mitzvah of tefillin. It says that he generated the same spiritual outcomes that we generate today through the mitzvah of tefillin. But those outcomes didn't come back and become integrated into the fabric of the physical world. So he didn't have to treat those tefillin, those sticks, with respect. He didn't have to put them in shemus. He could put them in the garbage.
So then...
One sec. Sorry, Rachel had a question?
I think it was off topic, actually.
Okay.
About this.
I have to run today at the end of class. I have to run a few minutes early, but hang on to it and I'll be happy to address it when I can.
Do you want to ask?
Do you want to ask it?
It was just you made a difference between the pen and the siddur, and you're saying that the siddur, like by using it for a mitzvah, is infused with godliness, but also the pen would be infused with godliness. So about an understanding of what's the difference, like what changes between them, because everything's godly.
Yeah, why do you use a pen for a mitzvah?
There's two different questions. That's what I thought you were going to ask, because someone asks that question every single time.
That's like definitely.
So no, you know what? It's not tough. It's not off topic at all. It's basically you're giving me a hard time because it's a very difficult thing to describe, and you're not letting me get away with just having a go at it. And the truth is, it's something that's intangible. So I don't know to what extent. There's a limit to what extent I understand it to myself, which is going to be expressed by the limit to which I can express it, because obviously, right? It's an intangible thing, the whole idea, the whole concept. But there is the fact that Hashem is making something exist, and then there is Hashem becoming a part of the fabric of the object. And that doesn't mean that Hashem isn't present in the same place and that Hashem isn't a part of it, but there are very different ways in which that can happen. For example, I'm a teacher. By definition, anyone whom I teach, I have some sort of relationship with, especially in a classroom. Now, there could hypothetically be a classroom in which there are students who are not really engaged and not really listening and not really part of things. And then there are students who are very involved and, involved in the discussion and asking good questions, etc. The fact is that the relationship between a teacher and an engaged student who's participating, and a teacher and a student, and a teacher and a student who's scrolling through Instagram under the table, is different, right? There is a relationship in both. They're both a teacher-student relationship, but the nature is very different, right? So Hashem has a relationship with everything. The question is, what's the nature of that relationship? To what degree? How internal is that connection? To what degree is Hashem actually a part of that? And in the teacher-student analogy, to what extent is this teacher a part of that student's experience? Right, for the student who's in the classroom, and maybe a student who's not scrolling through Instagram, but is listening. And then you have a student who's really engaged and really involved. Objectively, the fact is that when those two students walk out of the room, the teacher is going to have become a very different part of each student's experience. Right? So, depending on the relationship between an object and Hashem, based on what it's used for, etc., the extent to which Hashem has become a part of that object. Now, it's different here because it's not just the experience. An experience is still not part of the person themselves. Although the truth is, we can go a little deeper here. Experience, maybe this is, I don't know to what extent, I've never kind of gone down this path before specifically, but an experience, we think of experience as being kind of intangible, which it is to an extent. But at the same time, when I walk out of a room and I'm thinking about the experience I just had and the experience I'm going to have going forward, that experience, as intangible as it is in my experience, this is going to get confusing, it is also a real thing, because the fact is there are chemical reactions that are happening in the brain which are really the foundation of that experience, right? An experience is a real thing. You can, if you hook a person's brain up to, I don't know whether MRI or a CT scan would be the effective approach or something else, but the fact is, it's there, an experience, a sensation, a thought, an emotion, all these things are real, measurable physical events in the brain as well. Right, so that experience has actually become a part of the physical object as well. Right, now it doesn't mean that I could point and say, okay, so that potassium ion, which was part of the transmission of that message in the nerve cell, is part, I don't know what, but the fact is, it is a physical event as well, and it has become a part of the brain. Right? And if, God forbid, there have been stories of people who, as a result of an infection or something, lose their memory. How could a virus affect memory? Because the virus affects the brain tissue, which is physically storing those memories. Right, so the experience has also become a part of the person's body physically as well. Right, so the fact that there is a relationship between both objects and the creator doesn't mean that the relationship is equal. Doesn't mean the extent to which the creator has been integrated into the object's experience and even the matter which the object is made of are the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Liron. Got a question?
Yeah. So when we're doing a mitzvah today, then we're uplifting the object that we're using for it to the mitzvah.
Correct.
Saying like tefillin or Shabbos candles. But the main issue of doing this mitzvah, as far maybe it's not. This is what I thought. That I'm giving tzedakah. So right, the coin has something, or the bill, whatever. But then I'm using my hand, and I'm uplifting my body, right? Because I have the neshama and I have physical body. But then while I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm elevating my body too, right? My physicality. So when Mashiach comes, then it's so strong that the Mashiach comes, then the body will be the main issue, like the physicality, right? Mm-hmm. So when they did a mitzvah, they did uplift their body. It doesn't sound good. Their physicality, right?
Not necessarily so simple. We're going to get there. It's going to be part of it. And if when I'm done, that hasn't been resolved, remind me. Because I may not address that directly, even though it's going to be part of the discussion. So, go on.
One other thing. So about
I have to look so apologetic. You're allowed to ask a question.
About what Liora asked. So, what was their work in this world? So maybe it's just because that our generation's avoida is to like the biruni tzatzot. Right? And we're like, we need to, like, this is what we need to do. But maybe that wasn't their avoida. So, like, what was their avoida?
They did do bir netzutzos to an extent.
But how could they elevate the Mitzvah in Mitzrayim before given the Torah?
That's a good question. Yeah, right. I hope the camera doesn't explode. I can't afford a new one.
Don't do that again.
That's a good question. Bir netzutzos may be, not maybe, I think, bir netzutzos and bringing godliness into physical matter are not the same thing. They go hand in hand by definition today. But what birur nitzutzos means, taking something out of the place that it was stuck and basically freeing it. That's what the word birur means, right? Birur means to refine. So if you have something that is contaminated, the refinery process means removing the thing from the place in which it was. It doesn't mean bringing something else into it. So birur nitzutzos isn't technically the same thing as bringing Gashmias and Ruchnis, bringing matter and spirit together. They're two separate events. Now today the fact is they go hand in hand, and when we do one, we are generally doing the other at the same time, but they are two distinct events.
But they are godly sparks.
They are godly sparks. Now, we said before that physical actions were able to have a spiritual outcome. There wasn't a complete lack of any ability to interact. There was a lack of ability to integrate and become one. So a physical act could have a spiritual outcome. It's just that that spiritual outcome couldn't become part of the physical object. Right? So Birur Nitzutzis doesn't mean bringing divinity into a physical object. Today, because we do Birur Nitzutzis through mitzvahs, and mitzvahs today, and we'll get to this, why, what changed, mitzvahs today do bring matter and spirit together. When we do one, we do the other, but they are two distinct things. Birur Nitzutzis and bringing matter and spirit together are two distinct events that generally today go hand in hand, and they happen together. Because whatever triggers one triggers the other, but they're not the same thing. Does that make sense? So, what actually changed and why did it change? Well, I think everyone's getting a sense of what changed. What changed was, as the Medrash said, that barrier that prevented matter and spirit from being able to integrate was removed. The question is how and why. And the answer is in the first word of the Aseret Dibros. Actually, the first three words. Look, the first three words of the Aseret Dibros, the first three words of the Ten Commandments, which were this great event that happened at Har Sinai. The Ten Commandments were given from Hashem to Moshe and to us through Moshe. So, if we look at the opening three words of the Aseret Dibros, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem, your God. That's how we translate it. Now let's look at it a little more specifically, because the pasuk doesn't say Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It says Anochi Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokecha. I am Shem Havaya Yud Kei Vav Kei, your God. What's that?
It's the Chesed.
It's not quite Chesed technically. Generally, the way that we describe it is associated with Chesed, but it's not actually Chesed. We're going to get to it. So this name of Hashem, the name that's Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Hashem, it's a name that we refer to as Havaya, which is a variation of the actual name which we're not allowed to pronounce. That name of Hashem, which is a Yud followed by a Hey, followed by a Vav, followed by a Hey, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Even when we say it, I'm not going to say Hey because I'd be spelling the name out directly, which is a little still too close. Comfort. So that name, which is made up of the letters Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey, if you look at the build of the world in those letters, it's a combination of the words Haya, Hey, Yud, Hey, was, Hove, Hey, Vav, Hey, is, Yihye, will be. All rolled into one. Because this is what this, and going back as we've mentioned, I'm just going to address it very briefly. Names, as we've mentioned before, names of God are not God. Rabbi Yisroel GLICK is not me. Yisroel GLICK is not me. Sruli GLICK is not me. Tati is not me. That's what my kids call me, right? These are different terms that people use to refer to me. And each of them is naturally going to elicit a different persona of mine that's associated with the environment in which I'm called with that name. A name is not me. I am me, right? If we all just close our eyes for a second and think about me, what does me mean? That me is something that no one in the world is ever going to touch. No one in the world is ever going to experience that. It's hard enough, I don't know to what extent we ourselves really experience it. On a regular basis, certainly, if at all. So the me, who I am, doesn't have a name. A name is an accessory, a tool that a person uses to refer to me. And the reason that there are different names that are used to refer to me is because the names refer to a way in which I behave, a persona, a way in which I'm operating, functioning. It doesn't refer to the me that's inside. So this name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is a name that refers to a certain presentation or persona of Hashem. And that is the way in which Hashem operates, behaves, this persona, which is beyond the limits of time. Right? Time is a creation. Hashem created time. So time, time is a real thing. The limitations of time are real and true. Moments in time are separated by definition, but those separations do not apply to Hashem. He created them. As far as Hashem is concerned, every single moment in time exists together because He's the one who created them and allocated them separately from each other. Before he allocated them separately, they all existed together inside of himself, and they still do. Nothing changed on Hashem's part. It changed in terms of everything that exists inside of time. The same is true of space, but inside of time. So as far as Hashem himself is concerned, past, present, and future, they're all just creations, and they all coexist. As far as he's concerned, they're all the same thing. They're just things that he created. They're moments in time that he created, that are not, by definition, separate from each other in his experience. They are, by definition, separate from each other in our experience, because we exist inside of the framework of time. But the limitations of time don't apply to Hashem. He's the one who created them. So for Hashem, Haya, Hova, and Yeh, past, present, and future, all can coexist. Which is, so that operational aspect of Hashem, behavioral aspect, persona of Hashem, which exists before time, is referred to as, with this name, Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, past, present, and future, all rolled into one, because there's no separation. Then there's the name Elokecha, your God. Elokim, the name Elokim, and if you spell it with a hey, not with a kuf, it has the same numerical value, the same gematria as the word Hateva, the nature. Because this is this operational element of Hashem, this persona of Hashem, which is limiting, which is defining, which is creating things like time, where each moment in time is separate, distinct from each other moment in time, etc. If you look in the account of creation, Genesis, Bereshis, the very beginning, it says that Hashem created the world, Bereshis bara Elokim. It doesn't say Bereshis bara Yud Kei Vav Kei. Every act of creation that's listed in the Torah refers to Hashem with the name Elokim. Because creating a limited, defined world, which is limited by the confines of time and space and many other things, is a result of this operational persona of Hashem, which is limiting, which is defining. That persona, that aspect of Hashem, is referred to with the name Elokim. So when Hashem is creating a limited world, he is referred to with the name Elokim. Neither of those names refer to Hashem himself. Hashem himself doesn't have a name. Even Yud Kei Vav Kei, what this name refers to is a persona or behavior of Hashem's, of the Creator's, which is beyond and exists before time, which is why every moment in time can coexist as far as it is concerned. But it's still not the Creator in itself. It's still not the Creator itself. It's still a behavior or persona of the Creator. It's just one that predates the creation of time. Then there is Anochi, me. The first word of the Aseret HaDibros of the Ten Commandments is Anochi, I. Hashem says, I am now instructing you. And I, Anochi, Hashem, the Creator himself, isn't limited by the factors that define the function of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, and isn't limited by the parameters that define Elokim. It's not limited by the parameters that define spirituality, and not limited by the parameters that define physicality, matter, because he created them both. God decided he wanted to have matter, he wanted to have spirit, he wanted each one to have a set of rules that govern and define its existence and the way it operates. And he can decide to bend those rules if he wants to. He can decide to abolish them. He can decide to make them coexist and interact in a way that they naturally should not be able to. Because he's the one that created the scenario or the reality in which they can't coexist. So, Anochi, I, Hashem, Anochi, I, Havaya Elokecha, am the creator of both, or the entity behind both of these personas, who can therefore allow them to interact with each other in a way that they should not naturally be able to do. So now, before Hashem gave the Torah, it was being observed as a result of human initiative. We decided we want to observe Torah, we want to keep the Torah, and we did. And we are capable of incredible things. Human beings are capable of incredible things. But the extent of to which we can achieve anything is limited by our abilities and is proportional to our abilities. Each of us here in this room has the ability to achieve different things because we're different people. Right? And we say the sky is the limit and there's no limit to what we can achieve, which is true to an extent, but it's not absolutely true. There's no way that you can honestly say that there is absolutely no limit to what any given person can achieve. Can I walk to the moon? No. Now, that may change. I'll have to think of a different example. But right now, can I get to the moon? Maybe. Can I walk there? No. Can I be here and on the moon at the same time? No. Can I be here and not be here at the same time? Definitely not, right? So what I can achieve, we may say the sky is the limit, but it's not true that there is absolutely no limit to what any of us can achieve. There is absolutely a limit to what each of us can achieve. Now, the extent is probably beyond, we don't have to worry about, oh no, what happens if I reach the limit? Keep going. The sky's the limit. But that is relatively speaking, not absolutely speaking. Right? So, what we can achieve is limited by what defines us. So what they were able to achieve when they were performing mitzvahs of their own initiative was proportional to who they were and what they were capable of. They were people. Now, they had souls, but the bottom line is a body and a soul in and of itself isn't enough to unite matter and spirit, because matter and spirit coming together is impossible. The fact that we have a body and soul is in and of itself already a novelty, which Hashem has bent the rules to allow. And it's not just us. Every entity has a body and a soul. Even inanimate objects do. But observing mitzvahs of our own initiative, let me just finish the sentence, I'll take the question. Observing mitzvahs of our own initiative means we're doing it on our own terms, and we can achieve whatever we can achieve, which doesn't include uniting matter and spirit. It's impossible. When Hashem said, now I'm telling you to perform mitzvahs, I'm telling you to study Torah, I'm telling you to do what it says in the Torah. Now when we perform mitzvahs, we're doing it on Anochi's terms, not on Havaya's terms, and not on Elokecha's terms. Anochi. Hashem says, Anochi, I. Havaya Elokecha. The me who is behind Havaya and behind Elokecha, behind this infinite presentation or infinite presentation of God and this finite presentation of God, the God who's behind both of them, says, I allow the two to come together. I allow matter and spirit to become one. Now you're doing mitzvahs on my instruction. Now you're doing it on my terms. And I can allow the two to become one. So because Hashem instructed us to observe Torah and mitzvahs, that changed things completely. There was observance of Torah and mitzvahs before, but it was on our terms. It was our initiative, which means we could only achieve what we could achieve. Now we're doing it on Hashem's initiative, Hashem's terms, which means there's no limit to what we can achieve, because Anochi is unlimited. Am I seeing some confusion? So this is what changed when the Torah was given. And we have the ability, because the entity behind the Torah is the Anochi, it's not Havaya, it's not Elokecha, it's not the limited Or Ein Sof, it's not limited expression of Or Ein Sof, of infinite light, it's not even the infinite light, it's not the infinite radiance, it's the infinite one. It's the infinite one whose radiance is the infinite radiance, the Or Ein Sof. This is the Ein Sof, the infinite one. That's Anochi. That's undefinable, undescribable. There's no name that can refer to it. That's just I. Not I, but the Anochi in the Torah. So, when Hashem gave us the Torah, that gave us the ability to bring matter and spirit together. And that's why now, when we perform mitzvahs, we do bring divinity into matter. We can bring matter and spirit together. So, the act didn't necessarily change. The halachas didn't change. The halachas were not obligatory before, but if they wanted to fulfill the mitzvah, it was the same before as it was after. The outcome was completely different. Because up until that point, the outcome, there were physical outcomes, there were spiritual outcomes, and they remained completely separate. Now, because Hashem gave us the Torah, and Hashem can allow matter and spirit to come together, when we perform mitzvahs, we can and do bring matter and spirit together, and now we can make a dira b'tachtonim. We can bring God into the world and make this world into a place in which God is both comfortable and present. Now, present, again, doesn't just mean geographically because God's present everywhere. It means God becomes integrated into the fabric and experiences of the physical reality because we are now operating on the Creator's terms. Because the Creator said, now I'm asking you to do it. Now we're doing it on the Creator's terms, which means there's no limit to what we can achieve because there are no limits to the Creator. That's approximately half of the sikha we were supposed to cover. But it's at least a complete idea. Want to ask something?
Yes, so is that implying that the spiritual pursuits we can achieve with mitzvahs is unlimited?
The spiritual outcomes we can generate, 100%?
Unlimited.
Unlimited. Right, and we never know, a person could do a mitzvah and there are spiritual outcomes and they ripple through all the spiritual realities, and some of it ripples back and comes back down and affects my experience, and some of it affects the experience of someone across the world, and some of it, affects something in Atzilus. We have no idea what the outcomes are. That's not actually what you're asking, though, because it could be that it's limited, we just don't know. There is no limit, because we are now operating on the Creator's terms, not Havaya's terms and not Elekecha's terms. Anoichi, the Anoichi behind the Havaya and the Elekecha, the Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, and the Elekim, can allow them to become one, and can allow us to achieve infinity through our actions. And that's what changed when the Torah was given. Yeah. So I have to go now, unfortunately.